11 o'clock, time to get up. No, not really, but good morning from a somewhat wet, somewhat muggy Riverton. I'm Michelle Bradley with REC Networks. Although most people call me Michi, and some of you just, who knows what you call me? But anyway, I am hearing myself coming back again, and we need to get rid of that. So there it goes. Off, off, and away. All right. A lot going on this week. This is a very busy week in a lot of ways. The FCC is very busy. Also, too, I just want to point out that there's been some questions this morning because of the activity that is going on right now in the House of Representatives involving the impeachment proceedings and such. There have been some questions that have come around in regards to whether an LPFM station is allowed to carry the floor debate. And here's how it works. Any product of the federal government, if this includes the Senate floor, Senate committees, the House floor, House committees. It also includes other government agencies. Like, for example, you'll see us carry the FCC meetings, and we've also got some other FCC activities that will be rebroadcast on our Facebook page later in November. That is public domain. That information, those meetings are public domain. Now, some have asked, okay, can I carry it from C-SPAN? And the rule on C-SPAN is if C-SPAN's procedures are that if you are a non-commercial educational organization, which LPFMs would be, that because the government information is public domain, you can carry it. They would like attribution that you're carrying it. You cannot carry, though, events that are not happening, that are not the live floor debate or or committees. And I think White House events are also included in that. If you're like doing one of their, you can't rebroadcast one of their interview shows. You can't rebroadcast one of their symposiums that are being put on by some political or lobbyist organization or anything like that. You've got to limit it only to the House and Senate floor debate committees and White House events. What you can also do for the House, since the House is really where everything is happening right now, where that issue goes, you can go to live.house.gov, live.house.gov, and you've got to click on a couple places there, but there is a live feed on there that is not C-SPAN, but it is the live pool feed that comes from the House of Representatives. And so, while they're in the middle of votes, you'll basically hear silence or music. And so you don't get the C-SPAN talkover. The C-SPAN talkover is not public domain. So you got to be careful of that. And so, if you want to do this the right way, that would be the cleanest way to do it. But just be prepared to insert your own talk or your own content during the 5 and 15-minute votes, when they call for the yeas and nays. So, and I believe that's going on right now. I just had to shut it off so we can take care of business here today. So I just wanted to put that quick reminder in there that it is possible to carry this live if you want, and that's how you can do it. And your government is supposed to be public domain, and it's supposed to be available. And if you are, if I had the station up here and running, yeah, I would be carrying this, regardless of whether it's a left-centered thing or a right-centered thing. You know, you want to try to carry as much diversity of opinion as possible. And and being where I'm at here, we are in here in Riverton, here in the Delmarva Peninsula. We're really in the only district, the only congressional district that is Republican out of the 8 or 10 or so that are in Maryland. We're the only red district. Although we do have a little bit of an island of blue in our area. Our state delegates are blue. Our our Congress is red. So so you gotta do something. You got in areas like this, you gotta balance. You gotta try to balance out as much as you can. And again, it's up to the operation of your station and what you want to do with your station. It's totally up to you. We're taking chat right now. If you want to go into the chat on YouTube, we're there. Look for us on the chat, and feel free to pop in any questions anytime. And we might just derail ourselves and answer chat questions, or we might just sit on them for a while. So come join us on the chat, and yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Love to hear from you on the chat. Let's get into our normal business here that we normally talk about here. Let's talk about the renewals. This is the current situation right now. We're starting to see a lot of last minute filings. I think that the FCC did send out the ultimatum letters to a lot of LP, to a lot of stations, and said, if you don't file by this date, you're looking at a $3,000 fine. And I think we're reaching that date. I don't know if today was the ultimatum date or if yesterday was. We did see one renewal filed today for an LP. So we're at 91% right now, 170 out of 186. There's a couple, there's at least one on there that I'm not surprised is not filing. They're only, they've been trying to move, and they got weaseled into a very interesting timeshare where they've only got 2 hours in the middle of the night. And this is exactly the reason why I wanted to see the timeshare proposal that I put together in NB docket 19-3. So every station would have a real chance of being able to do something, and if they lose their license or they cancel or something, that they'll have something that can be used by somebody else. And there's a couple of them on there that I'm surprised. I'm not from the area. I have not heard any of these stations, but but I was involved in some way or another in the earlier processes, or I've been following the situations because of MXs and stuff. Like WSQF, I thought they were on the air. That's a station out on Key Biscayne, and they're gone, I guess, because they're not checking in on this. So 170 out of 186. We'll see what happens. There's still 5 in North Carolina, South Carolina that haven't filed. I don't know the status of any of those stations. So we try to reach as hard as we can. The FCC tries to reach as hard as they can, and if these stations don't apply, and they simply lose their license, and that's what we're at there. Let's look at the upcoming FCC meeting that is scheduled for Tuesday, November 19th from 10:30. There's several telecom-related issues on there, and as well as 2 media issues. And one of those is a big one, too. Protecting national security through FCC programs. That is a telecommunications universal service proposal that is taking into consideration that there's certain companies that that the that the federal government is worried about, like from a national security standpoint, mainly Chinese companies, seeing things from a national security perspective. So, from a national security perspective, if a company's got a bad reputation, this rulemaking is to assure that those companies are not eligible to participate in universal service programs and such like that, where telecommunications equipment is being provided or discounted, or services are being provided. So that's pretty much what we've got there. Wireless E911 accuracy requirements. I guess the FCC is trying to step up the ability for 911 call centers to get better locations on cell phones. Makes sense. Especially where I'm at. I live in this area where there's a Highway 54 that runs in Maryland and Delaware, and you're starting in Maryland, you go into Delaware, and then you're traveling right along the state line. 54 is the state line. If you're going east, you look on the left side. The left side is Delaware. The right side is Maryland. So it's like when you call 911, where does the call? I had to call 911 the other day. I was filing a DUI, and I needed state troopers, and fortunately they pulled into their driveway before I was able to reach somebody. That's another problem with mobile 911 is you don't get very quickly to the agency that you want to go to. There's so many problems still with the 911 system. They really need to fix these problems. Modernizing rules for removing bad actors from FCC programs. This is also having to do with Universal Service Fund and other programs, telecommunications services for the deaf and disabled, and such, where there has been a lot of abuse in those systems. There's a lot of people who are trying to bilk the system for that and such. Modernizing unbundling and resale rules. That is a telecom issue. Mainly it's a broadband. I believe this is a broadband wireless telecom issue. I have not had a chance to read it yet in detail. Considering it's a WC docket, that would be out of the Wireless Competition Bureau is what WC is. We'll skip the next two because we will talk about those in more detail. Expanding TRS fund contribution base for IP captioned telephone service. That's telecommunications relay service. That's for the deaf and disabled services there, and that is the ability to be able to talk to deaf subscribers using using a relay service, and the deaf user using something that is connected to the internet, an IP network. That's what the IP captioned telephone service is all about. So those are the items up for grabs. That'll be on Tuesday, November 19th, 10:30. That is a Tuesday. That's not a normal day for an FCC meeting. Normally, FCC meetings are on Thursday. We will carry that on Tuesday on our Facebook Live. We really won't have any commentary before or after that. We're going to start at 10:25 and with the test pattern, and then go into the meeting at about 10:30, and then go right out of it at the end. So if you want to catch that, that'll be on the REC Facebook page, and we look forward to you checking that out. Now let's talk about the media items that are on the next agenda. And these are both notices of proposed rulemaking. First one is for all digital AM broadcasting, and this flew through the process. Pye, I guess, Chairman Pye is just really wants to gung-ho this through. And so the draft NPRM is out. Mostly everything in there, is what we expected would be in there. They did address a couple of the REC issues that I've discussed in the previous RM, including the issues regarding emergencies, regarding the fact that if the only station in the operational area goes digital, the only AM station in the county goes digital, what's going to happen? So these are the issues that I've been bringing up. Also, too, the lack of AM radios with, the lack of tabletop AM radios versus FM radios that are digital capable. And also, too, the lack of AM radios in vehicles, especially with the electric vehicles, the Priuses, the Teslas, and such. A lot of these electric vehicles don't have AM radios in them because the electrical systems very much interfere with the radios to the point of where the radios, and keeping in mind that's considering analog. Now, whether the digital would be able to make it through all the noise that is generated by an electrical vehicle system or not, that has yet to be seen. So they want to do the MA3 mode, which is what the station out in Frederick, Maryland is currently testing on right now. I will say this though, for those of you who've been exposed to IBOC digital and it bleeds on other channels and all that, the bandwidth of an all digital signal is supposed to be much thinner than it's supposed to be much thinner than the hybrid signal, because of the fact that there's less bandwidth required. What there is there's going to be an unmodulated carrier at the center of the center frequency, and then you're going to have digital sidebands that will be suppressed power. So as it mentions on here, the power levels will remain the same for the unmodulated carrier. So if you've got a 5 kilowatt AM station, it's going to be 5 kilowatts on that unmodulated, a very, very narrow unmodulated carrier. And then the digital sidebands would then be suppressed, and maybe like half of the power or less. It's it is energy saving, I guess. It is energy saving because obviously you are actually using less power, because you're not having to do a 5 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz plus wide signal at 5 kilowatts, where it's so just going to be this very narrow signal, and then you've got the suppressed sidebands. Again, the FCC is going to be asking about how would all digital AM impact emergency broadcasting and EAS. Had some, the thoughts. The original REC thoughts on that was that how would the AM, what would happen? All these people who have like emergency packs, go packs, emergency preparedness kits, where they tell you put a radio in there. Some people just have AM radios. What if you're in an area where the terrain is not favorable for FM? Malibu, what do you do? And and if the only stations in town go digital, how are you going to be able to get emergency information, especially if you don't happen to have an FM radio in there? One of the points that I did bring up that I'm going to consult with the industry on, because one of the questions I'd like to get answered is, for these MA3 digital AM stations, if a station goes MA3, how long does it take if a station decides, hey, we need to switch to analog, like pronto? How long does it take for a station to switch from MA3 to analog? And can they do that in an emergency situation? Can they do that in an emergency? That's the big question, and that's one of the questions I'll be raising in front of the industry and towards others, to see what the answer is on that, because I want to know. I want to know if they can do a flash cut to that, maybe we have something to work with here. Also, too, with the recent national periodic test that we had a few months ago, at least here in Maryland, the one where they just used radio only and there was no cap, no internet. It was a disaster. We could not hear the alerts because there was so much noise, and the AM station was coming in so weak that you couldn't hear it. And if it's going to be that weak as an analog signal, how weak is that going to be for a digital signal? If that station, if that entry point station went digital, how would that work in the EAS? These are the I'm looking at this from a bigger picture, because obviously the FCC still wants, and FEMA still wants, this radio backup system with the national entry points and such. They still want that system. And they tested that system this year. And in some areas it worked great, but in some areas like here, Florida, Southern California, it was a mere failure. A mere failure. So government's got a lot of work to do. I'm looking forward to seeing the report on this year's testing. Let's see what else. Some of the issues that have also been raised too is, how would this affect travelers' information stations, the little 10-watt stations along the side of the road? I don't see a lot of impact on that. I think maybe the question is I think the bigger question on that one is how is digital interference on an analog, how will digital interfere with an analog signal? If you've got a digital signal and an analog signal and they're both trying to compete for the receiver, how is that going to sound to the listener? That's what I'd like to know. That is truly what I'd like to know. So we've got that. Two, what are the impacts to listeners? Obviously, a station is not going to convert unless they know that they've got a market to do it, or they've got a really good translator. One of the things I've asked for is that over time, maybe like over 5 or 10 years after a station goes all digital, that they have to give up their translator. And the FCC put in footnotes, we don't even want to talk about that. So, go figure. Also, too, what are the costs? What are the costs for the stations to convert? Especially with all of the royalties and stuff for HD radio. Are small minority-owned, and rural stations going to be able to make the conversion? Or are they going to want to make the conversion? Again, I want to point out a couple things. Number one, this is totally voluntary to stations. This is going to be totally voluntary. And also, too, this is going to be something that is going to involve a thinner bandwidth. So you're not going to have we should not be expecting the nighttime issues like we've had with the hybrid nighttime IBOC, where if you were listening 10 kilohertz up or 10 kilohertz down, all you heard was this screechy noise instead of a distant station. And for those of us, like including here, where we do not get any community coverage at night, from local stations in the Salisbury market, the most boring media market in America, we don't have, so we're dependent at night. If we want AM, we are dependent on Skywave here in Riverton. And there's many other parts of the country that are that way. How is digital going to affect those listeners? Is the FCC going to allow, let's say, KFI in Los Angeles, the entry point for the EAS? Are they going to allow those guys to go digital? Is KFI going to want to go digital? Who I see going digital is, this is what I picture. Smaller towns, smaller AM stations that have actually built their listenership on their FM translator. Those who have developed their FM translator and have developed that a majority of their listening is on the FM translator, and they want to cut the AM down, and they want to do it as a power saving method. So what they'll do is they'll either, they'll just go ahead and switch to digital, or they may just move the station to another site, diplex with another station, drop down to minimums, and diplex, and then sell the land where the other station is, and they're going to make a ton of money. So that's where I could see this going. You know, let's see here. Let's look at let's look at the questions. Colin James puts in a question here. We'll get back to the other agenda item here in just a moment here. Is there any sort of nonprofit you can start that would get priority consideration over other nonprofits applying for FCC LPFM licenses? For example, I started a nonprofit that was started specifically to start an LPFM station and called it the Low Power FM Community Foundation or something like that. Would that get priority over, say, a school or a church? No, actually, the school or church would get the priority. And I'll tell you why. The FCC looks at a few things. Number one is, first of all, I want to make this clear. When the FCC designed LPFM back in 2000, the idea of LPFM was to allow existing nonprofit organizations, including national organizations that have local chapters, to be able to extend their organization's outreach and educational program to also include broadcasting. That was the initial reason for LPFM. When LPFM was first created in 2000, there was a national ownership of 10 stations, a national ownership cap of 10 stations. So this would allow like a group, like for example, let's say the NAACP is a good example. And they have 10 chapters, maybe they have up to 10 chapters across the country that maybe have LPFM stations. Those, they would still be allowed, they would still been allowed to have that common ownership. What the FCC did was, though, is they said, we're going to give priority to the local organizations. For the first window, you can only apply for one station. Well, that was the 2000-2001 window series. And then, the idea originally was that there was going to be periodic filing windows. And the idea was we're going to do LP 100 for these local organizations. We're going to split it up into 5 windows divided by states, because we're anticipating such a huge rush. Well, they ended up doing 2 windows. And then came the Radio Broadcast Protection Act. Right in the middle of the filing window series, Congress passes an act that takes away the third adjacent. So now the FCC went on with a third window to cover the remaining states because they figured there's going to be less applications that had to protect the third adjacent. And then they went back to the original stations and said, okay, original applicants say, okay, for those of you who are third adjacent short space now because of the passing of the law, we need you to either, you need to file an application to try to clear yourself onto a channel that will also clear the third, that will protect third adjacent. Some of them were able to, many of them were not. And then on March 17th of 2003 was the St. Paddy's Day Massacre, the day that a whole ton of LPFM applications that could not make the third adjacent were dismissed. Now, there's one thing you got to remember about that first LPFM window was many of the organizations that filed in that window were existing nonprofit organizations that already existed in the state, that already existed in the area, and they were expanding onto their educational programs. That's what they did. We did not see this trend of microstations, which is is the segment that I call organizations that are formed just for the sole purpose of running an LPFM station. We did not see that happen until the 2013 window. And so 2013, we had a lot of microstation activity in that window. So going back to the question here, what would the priorities be? Well, the FCC looks at several points, and there's no proposal to change these points. And what they're looking for, what they're going to give priority to, is they're going to give priority to any organization that has been in existence for more than 2 years. So if you are a microstation organization and you have ambitions to be in the next window, file for your state corporation at least 2 years prior to when the filing window is going to be. That way you can take that point. A lot of the stations that lost missed out because of that point. If you pledge to a main studio, even though the main studio rule for full service is gone, we still have a main studio point in LPFM. And you pledge to 8 hours of local programming per day, then you can claim 2 points there. And then a third point for a bonus point if you're able to claim those two. You are also able to claim a point for diversity if you don't have any other broadcast holdings of any kind. And that most of you will be able to claim the diversity point. Diversity point will only become an issue for colleges that have a separate student station. They're allowed, colleges that have a full service station are allowed to have an LPFM if the LPFM is going to be operated and managed solely by the students and faculty advisors. So you got those 4 points, and then the 2 years local presence. That's your 5 points right there. If you get that, then you got the full 5 points. Now, what would happen is that if there is, in the event of mutual exclusivity, and there are more than 3 applicants with 5 points or equal number of points, what the first of all, the FCC is going to give an opportunity for MX groups to be able to make changes. They'll be able to make changes to their channel, more like a major kind of change to their channel, and also to their location. They'll have a lot of flexibility where it comes to location. The idea is that as long as you can break out of the MX group, if at the time that window's over with and the FCC is ready to make the final decisions, the FCC will look at the number of points that each applicant has. Now, if there are more than 3 applicants that have the same number of points, if you're in a larger MX group and you've got 5 applicants and they all have 5 points, what the FCC is going to do is they're going to look at a date that you enter on your form that is the date that your organization started. It's your local presence date. And what they're going to do is they're going to take the 3 oldest organizations, the three organizations with that date. Now, of course, you got to make sure that you include paperwork with your application that backs up that date. You got to make sure that if you're claiming that your organization was started in 1998, you better include articles of incorporation, a state filing that shows that organization, showing a stamp that organization was started in 1998. Otherwise, you could get challenged. The FCC could pull it out and such, and that's how that works. Now, the only time that you have to actually abide by the pledges, the main studio in 8 hours, is if at the final result the FCC grants your application but then dismisses somebody else's based on points. So let's say you're in a MX group. There's 2 of you in an MX group. You both claim 5 points. You both so you're both claiming main studio and such. And then you're able to find, you and the other station, hey, let's look. We're going to both split off. There's another beautiful channel here. I'll move to that channel. You stay where you're at. The FCC grants both stations as unlimited stations. You don't have to do the pledges. recnet.com/pledges. There is a list of the LPFMs that did go all the way through the process and such. Um, so that's where we're at on that. So it all depends on that. It's not has nothing to do with whether you're starting the organization for running the LPFM station. It has to do with your community presence and also your educational program. You need to make sure that you state in your application what about your organization and how your station is going to advance how the station is going to advance your organization's educational goals. And I want to make sure you realize one thing is, and this is currently right now being argued in the Charlottesville 5 case with the 5 LPFMs in Charlottesville that Saga Communications has filed an informal objection against and during the renewal process, is that just because you include an educational statement, that does not bind you to running the programming that you that the educational statement says. You are not required to run that programming. That like if you say that you're going to run, that you're going to run Hawaiian and Native American music to expose the citizens of Salisbury to Hawaiian and Polynesian cultures and such, and then you turn around and carry ranchera, and you decide to take the station Spanish or Creole. We do have a Creole LPFM here in Salisbury, WRBY-LP. If you decide to do something different, the FCC can't hold that against you because you didn't put that in your educational statement. The First Amendment and previous Supreme Court decisions are very clear that the FCC cannot control your content, entertainment content on there. That's also the C-SPAN radio case. There's several cases, and we've gone back to that before, and we've cited cases in situations before. But the FCC cannot tell you what kind of programming you can run. The only things that the courts would allow is, where it comes to indecency, advertising, cigarette advertising especially. There are certain forms of speech that can be controlled, but they cannot tell you that you cannot run a non-commercial station that plays Japanese popular music and Gregorian chants. You can do that if you want. You don't have to get anybody's permission. Except maybe music licensing. Does ASCAP cover Gregorian chants? I don't know. So anyway, that's the answer to your question. On that is, everybody's treated equal. It's all based on your establishment date. I would suggest that you start your organization in your state or in Delaware or any state. Delaware is probably the easiest state to incorporate in. I do have an organization called Riverton Radio Project Association, which is an organization that is technically separate from REC, and is a Delaware nonprofit that Eva is the vice president and I'm the president of. And the sole purpose of the main motivation behind getting that corporation formed is to apply for a non-commercial license of some kind here in upcoming filing windows. Now, we are maintaining a community presence. We are running RECFM, and we're running a website at recfm.org, which does carry some local information on it. It actually has the local EAS even hooked up to it, so you can see all the EAS messages that have come in. So it does have local content on there. And to us, that is community presence. If anybody was to question that, we've been on the air, so that way, we've been on doing RECFM for a little while now, and we've been running the local website as a local outreach, and that's our local presence. That justifies our 2 years, and that justifies us claiming that point. So, and now full service non-commercial, the rules, the policies are a little different there, but that's pretty much what we got there. Other question here, Stephen White, wouldn't it have been great if FM translators for AM could have been tied in with all digital AM? I don't know. The idea is, the way I see it, is I want to get rid of that crutch, that FM translator crutch, because that's really what it is. It's a crutch. You know, this started with the digital, the HD radio for FM, and how the penetration of HD receivers on the in the FM market has not been that prominent. Yes, it's been a little more prominent in the dashboard than it's been on the tabletop. And that's, of course, if you have a newer car. And in virtually all the cars anyway, HD is an option. I've heard of people getting cars with HD radios in them, but the HD is turned off and they actually have to go into a menu to do it, and the dealers don't know how to do it. The dealers don't know anything about HD radio. They're selling these cars and they don't know anything about HD radio. So this gets you wondering, you know, is this technology really a failure? It really, I mean, HD would work in, hang on, let me adjust this chair. HD would work, you know, if we can get the radios out. For HD for FM, we can get the radios out. The problem is that we just don't have that market penetration where, you know, everybody and their mother has an HD radio. I've got an HD radio. I mean, I've got a little tabletop HD radio. I've got one of the Best Buy ones, the Insignia. And, you know, that radio is an FM only radio. There's very few AM radios for the tabletop market. I think there's like, I think Sanjean makes one. When I was in California, I was at Fry's Electronics, and I mean, they had very few items in that store. That place looked so freaking dismal. But one of the things they did have in stock there was they did have tabletop HD radios, and I believe they had the Sanjean radios there, and those do have AM capability. But the most publicly accessible HD radio, the one from Best Buy, does not have AM. It only has FM. So we'll just have to see where that goes. Well, and so you're saying, okay, crutch good for the transition period, but then gone. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is if there's an AM station with a translator already, and they decide to convert to FM, I mean, they decide to convert to digital, to MA3, that there should be a period of time, like a 5 or 10 year transition period. It can be, and I'll be able to make it long. That's no problem. I have no problem with making it a longer period. But then after that, they have to give up that FM translator, because they've already made this marketing decision that the time is right for digital AM. Gets them to rethink, do they really want to go digital? Like I said, the one reason that they would want to go digital, of course, is going to be the cost savings. You know, I mean, right now, AM stations are allowed to do MDCL, which is a modulated carrier for analog stations. It does cut the power consumption down a little bit, but I think the AM digital will actually cut the power consumption even more than that. And also, too, with the translator available and the 25-mile limit, yeah, an AM station could go down to a Class D kind of facility, you know, of maybe like 5 watts at night and, you know, less, you know, and so much during the day, and then move to a different site and be able to diplex with another existing AM station on a non-directional facility, and then sell the land that their big 3-tower, you know, 5 kilowatt day, 1 kilowatt night directional AM facility is on. that they say that nobody listens to anymore, because now they're listening on the FM translator that might be 250 watts on a mountaintop in the middle of a rural area, where they can go 250 non-directional from a mountaintop and still be able to achieve a usable signal. What's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen is with Auction 106 coming up, how that's going to impact the translators, because translators are not required to protect vacant allotments for the new FM stations that are going to be coming along. LPFMs do, but translators don't. And when the when these FM stations come on the air, these translators could get wiped out. I mean, there's not that. I don't think there's going to be that many, because obviously the allocation is there. It's in the database for anybody who has any kind of engineering ability to be able to see, and so therefore whoever puts a translator on the same channel as a vacant allotment, they're basically asking for trouble. They're asking for suicide, because there's going to be a day when that vacant allotment is going to be auctioned off, and there's going to be another opportunity next April to do that. So there we go. Lots of talk here. Feel free to drop any more comments. Let's see. New York City subway life and more. Do you think New York City AM stations going to digital? I know there are 3 low power AM stations in the New York City area. Do you care to elaborate on which stations those are? Are you talking about travelers information stations, or are you talking about actual broadcast stations with a 4-letter call sign? That's there's no talk right now of travelers information stations going digital. No talk about that at all right now. If anything, the travelers information station industry is already worried about digital AM. So I don't see them going through that. The other item that's on the agenda for the commission is the duplication of programming rule. This was last changed back in back in the 90s, I think. And basically the rule right now is, and this is for full service stations, 2 full service stations that are on the same band, so 2 AMs or 2 FMs, that have at least, that where there is overlap, basically in the same area, where there's overlap of their 70 dB city grade contours for FM, or 5 millivolt per meter for AM. If they overlap by at least 50%, they cannot duplicate more than 25% of the programming. So they can't simulcast. So you can't have basically, bottom line is, you can't have 2 very close FM stations running the same program. Okay, now the FCC, there's a proposal to get rid of this. Now this is, as you can see, this is in part of MB Docket 17105. That's Chairman Pai's media modernization initiative, where a lot of media issues have been coming up. Now, just to be fair, my LPFM changes that appeared in 19-3 and 19-193 were also filed, with the exception of LP 250, were also filed in the media modernization docket. So just to be fair, Chairman Pai is being just as fair to LPFM as he is to being on these other services. Basically, they're looking for various burdens and such like that are not helping broadcast stations. So the question is, should 2 AFM stations within the same area be allowed to carry the same programming more than 25% of the time? That is the question. Apparently, there's somebody out there that wants this rule repealed. Now, I have a huge issue with this on FM, because that is going to invite the Educational Media Foundation, EMF, the Air One, the K-Love folks, to come in and say, okay, we need to preach the word of God, and we need 2 stations. All right, we're going to put one here. We're going to put one here. More than 50%. We want to hear no matter what. Even though you could hear both stations very clearly in virtually all the areas. They want to be able to, I could see that. Okay, I mean, I could totally see that. Is the overlapping programming and such. I mean, the American Family Association, Brian Fisher, which some folks find their I mean, let me give you factual information only, because I try not to be political here on the wearing the REC hat. Okay, the organization American Family Association has been declared a quote hate organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center. We'll leave it at that. Okay, they have, I believe, they've got 3 signals in their headquarters city of Tupelo, Mississippi. Why do they need 3 signals? I mean, yeah, they could be running 3 channels of programming, but why do they need 3 signals? Myself, I would like to see a national ownership cap on non-commercial educational stations. I don't feel that there's a need for these nationwide non-commercial organizations, or these very heavy region-wide non-commercial organizations. For example, there is no reason that the University of Southern California should have stations in the San Francisco Bay Area. There's no need for that. They're the University of Southern California. Go Trojans! Unless you're a Bruins fan. So there's no need, and what they've done is over the years they have bought out stations. They've bought out failing non-commercial stations and made them classical. But still, they're putting a common program across. And of course, the biggest offender is Educational Media Foundation, K-Love and Air One. This is sad. And right now with the fires going on in Southern California, we're hearing that the EMF stations are not even cutting, other than an EAS that might have to be run. They are not cutting away for any kind of local coverage. They're not giving any information out on evacuations, where to go for shelter, where what the status is of things. They are not giving out any information whatsoever. They are playing their satellite feed. What's wrong here, people? What's wrong? We need these rules. If anything, we need these rules to be stricter. Why 70 dB? Especially down in the reserve band where 70 dB is not even used. And such. Why do we now? I do see one valid concept for the duplication rule, and that's on AM. Now picture this. You have an AM cluster. You have 2 commonly owned AM stations, same area, and they want to do the digital transition. They've got one station. They've got their strong analog AM flagship station, which may actually be booking something on the lower end or such, but they want to start that conversion to digital. So they take their weaker station, they take their weaker rating station that might be running some satellite talk format or some automated format of some kind, and they take that digital, but keep the heritage AM station on the air as analog. and they use and what they do is they simulcast. They do 100% simulcast of their AM signal, of their heritage AM analog signal, on the digital signal that's also on AM elsewhere on the dial. I don't see an issue with that. I mean, right now those signals are not even hardly being used. If you see you don't see a whole flock of AM stations in the ratings. Even in the big markets like Los Angeles, Atlanta, where where WSB, an AM station, is usually the number one station in the market. You don't, the lowerarchy, you don't see a lot more of the AM stations there. If you do, they're going to be down like below a 1 share and such. So, there is that. I want to, it would be kind of interesting to see, it would be interesting to see what the comments are and who's going to be defending this. Who's going to defend the repeal of the duplication of programming rule? Take a look at this and think to yourself, look at that rule and think to yourself, who is going to want that completely repealed, where 2 stations close together can run the same programming all the time, or at least more than 25% of the time. It'll be interesting to see who comments in this proceeding in favor of that. Like I said, I could see an application for AM for a digital analog simulcast. And I mean, this is no different than what they want to do, what they're doing in other countries right now with Digital Radio Mondiale. The Digital Radio Mondiale hybrid concept is actually very simple. It's an analog signal on one frequency, and then a digital, a DRM, 9 kilohertz up. That's how they're doing it. Now, that's how they're experimenting with this in India and other places where DRM is being experimented with. The FCC also has made it clear that DRM is not an option for the United States. They made that very clear in that proceeding. So there we go. The other issue that we are working right now, first of all, just a reminder, is that MB docket 19193 comments are due on November 4th. The reply comments. So if you've got something to say about 19193, that's the FCC, the LPFM technical changes. Got to get those into the electronic comments filing system by the 4th. You can go to fcc.gov/ECFS, that's Electronic Comments Filing System, and then click on Submit a Filing, and then for proceeding, it's 19-193. Let's see, Joy mentions WGBB. Yes, good, 1240, Long Island. They were a station that's had a very interesting jingle heritage and had a jam package called Good Time Radio that was piloted for them. So yeah, I'm familiar with the old WGBB. I didn't know that they were running you said something about Subway and Life and more. I guess are they running transportation information on there? So I mean, that's a great concept. Actually, when I was recently in Baltimore about 2 months ago, and I was at WBAL Channel 11 here in Baltimore, and I was there for the Society of Broadcast Engineers meeting. And when I was there, had a chance to scan the dial, and the Maryland Transit Administration, the state of Maryland runs the transit agency, they actually have their own radio station. And this is a transit radio station. They play jazz music, but they also intersperse it with information about public transportation, including service advisories. I think this is great. This is an interesting, I mean, this is the public safety use that we had talked about back in 2000 for LPFM. And it's a great way of doing things. So yeah, there you go. We're coming up on 12 o'clock here at REC. We're going over. We're going over because we still got stuff to talk about. But yeah, WGBB. Not sure because I don't believe they have a translator. Oh, they do have translators. Okay, they've got two of them. They've got a 95.9 in Freeport. Let's see if that's even licensed. It's still construction permit. Okay, it's still in construction permit. It looks like they've moved it towards Hempstead. So they moved it from Freeport to Hempstead on 95.9. And then they've got one here marked as Plainview on 101.5. Yeah, 101.5, and they've got a... Oh, okay, they've got a CP to increase the power on that. So it's going to be a 100 watt wacky directional pattern. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But you know, those two stations seem to be, at least that one is pretty well outside the 5 boroughs. You know, well past the reach of the subway, more like the LIRR. And the Freeport, I believe, is also... yeah, I guess that is... yeah, I guess that's right on the edge, maybe. I don't know. I don't know New York that well. That area there where Floral Park, Elmont, Valley Stream, Woodmere, Lake Success. I don't know. Does the subway reach out that far? I don't know. I don't know. But still, you know, if they want to do a, if they are still very dependent on their AM, then it's very unlikely they'll go digital. It's very unlikely. If they've got an established AM audience and they've got a niche program on AM, and their FMs, they're not as dependent on their FMs, especially if they're trying to get into the 5 boroughs, which I mean, they've got a, what, 1 kilowatt, they're non-directional 1 kilowatt. So, I mean, they're well, they're 2 millivolt, you know, really barely makes it in there. There's 0.5 ground wave, which is kind of like their fringe area. That does make that into like Queens and probably in a little bit of Brooklyn. So yeah, they could probably be heard, probably with a lot of hash and trash. The interesting experiment's going to be is how are these stations going to sound? How is a digital going to work during the day where there isn't a co-channel or first adjacent and they're a considerable distance from the station where the reception of the digital signal is fairly weak? Is the system going to be able to pick out and decode that signal if it's kind of on the weaker side? That's going to be interesting to see. I have not had a digital radio where I could play with the Frederick station. Also, too, where that AM station is that's currently running digital, that's clear on the other side of the state. So I really don't have any opportunity to go check that out. Here in Riverton, we get no digital. And actually, we pretty much get no digital. I mean, there are some stations that claim to be digital, but we don't hear them here on the west side of Wicomico County. And I don't know, maybe they're heard in Ocean City or in Delaware or somewhere, but they're not heard here. So that's what we've got there. Let's move a little forward too, because we've got another petition for we got another NPRM that's currently out right now, and that is the public notice rule changes. And this is where the FCC is wanting to take newspapers out of the public notice requirement. And it's going to also hopefully fill a rules void that we ran into with renewals this year, where, see, currently there is no FCC rule, keyword rule, that relates to broadcast station, LPFM stations having to do public notices. However, there is a statute in the Communications Act that says that LPFM station, that any broadcast station is required to do public notice on certain types of applications. This would be like for new applications. This would be for assignments. It's also for renewals. Anything that has to do with the qualification of the licensee that might be coming into that area. Also, major moves are public notice. In the past, in regular broadcast and full service rules, you have rules that you have specific rules on this where full service stations, commercial stations, are required to put ads in the newspaper, in the legal notices section of the newspaper. That can get very expensive. NCE stations that are on the air already and they're doing like a major change or an assignment, they can, mainly assignments, they can put these announcements over the air. But otherwise, they're going to the newspaper too. Also, any new applications for any new stations, even translators, they've got to do public notice, and it involves a newspaper ad. Full service stations, 4 ads, and over a period of time. Translators only need to do 1. LPFM is supposed to be doing this. However, in this rush to get LPFM out in 2000, and in this rush with not applying every rule towards LPFM, the FCC back in 2000 decided, hey, we're not going to put a rule in to require public notice. We're not going to cross-reference 73.3580 for LPFM stations. We're not going to do it. Which is okay. So that means we went through the 2000 window with about maybe about 700 or 800 stations eventually being accepted for filing. Then we went through the 2013 window with about 1,700 station applications that were accepted for filing. And every one of them unknowingly violated statute because they did not put the public notice in the newspaper. It didn't eventually dawn on anybody until the latest renewal cycle that we're going through right now. And just before renewals were going to start for Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and DC, myself, Paul Bain, Will Floyd at Prometheus, the folks at Common Frequency, we were all asked to spread the news. We were all asked by Albert Schuldner, who is the new, who's the recent change, as the chief, division chief of the audio division, who eventually came up with this revelation. And this revelation happened as a result of somebody calling FCC staff to ask whether LPFM stations have to do the announcements because they can't find a rule to reference it. Well, they did some research. They said at first, no, LPFMs don't have to do this. They even put it on their website. LPFMs do not have to do the announcements. And then the bombshell was dropped on all of us who are the stakeholders in LPFM policy, because we got the letter from Albert Schuldner that said, okay, we were wrong. You do have to file. You do have to make the announcements. There may not be a rule, but the Communications Act says that you got to, because there is a statute that says that broadcast stations have to do public notice. So of course I dropped the question. I said, well, what about other public notices? What about assignments and new construction permits and major changes during a window? Where are we going with that? And he gave me the impression like, well, you gotta do public notices for those too. But we don't have any rules for the public notice. We don't know if it's going to be 1 or 4. How many public notices do we have? And after that, I dropped comments late filed in this proceeding here, this 17264, and basically said, hey, whoa, stop. LPFM needs to be brought into this conversation now. Now that we're being told that we are statutorily obligated and there's no LPFM representation here, so we're stepping in. We're saying we need to do something. So a few weeks later, the FCC puts out the draft notice of proposed rulemaking. It went to, I think, the September meeting. And the September meeting was when they adopted where they adopted these rules, or they adopted this proposed rulemaking, I should say. But the bottom line is this: is with these new rules, newspapers will be totally out of the running. Newspapers will be out. What will be in will be more on-air announcements for stations that are currently on the air. For stations that are not on the air, for applicants who are not on the air yet, they're going to have to either go through, they'll have to go through a website. And the idea is since they don't have their own, usually won't have their own website by then, and people won't know where to find it. This brings up a new issue, is that they can go, the FCC suggests that they can go to a website run by a city government, a, quote, community bulletin board website, whatever that is these days, or they can go to their state broadcasters association. Well, let's touch on those. Let's touch first on the municipal government website. First of all, now you're putting city government into a position where now they're having to judge who should and who shouldn't be an LPFM station. Do you see some First Amendment issues there? Also, with that, let's take into consideration the issue of faith-based stations. If a municipal government on their website was to put public notices for broadcast applications that are being filed by a church, where does that put the city in establishment? Do we have an establishment issue here? We might. So city is not a good idea. City websites are not a good idea. Okay, let's go on to the bulletin board websites. There's really, do you know of any kind of like a bulletin board? I mean, other than like these little Facebook groups that are, that are geared towards cities. I'm in several of these Facebook groups, these town gossip groups, for all the previous places I used to live. Is that what they're considering? Or are they considering like a site ran by a newspaper? Newspaper industry. You know what they're going to do? They're going to want all that money that they're losing from putting the public notices in print. So that takes us now to our state broadcasters associations. Okay. Now I did put out a question the other day on a couple on the REC page and a couple Facebook groups, and I still need information. I am soliciting information on how your state's broadcast association is receptive to LPFM. The one state broadcasters association that I've heard multiple reports from is the state of Oklahoma. And from what we understand, like in the state of Oklahoma, at first they were very apprehensive to LPFM stations being in their membership. Now they're welcoming. Now you also have other states out there, such as New Jersey. New Jersey's Broadcasters Association is very hostile towards all secondary services, both translators and LPFM. Do we really think that the New Jersey Broadcasters Association is going to publish public notices on behalf of LPFM stations and FM translators that may not be cross-owned with one of their member stations? Do we really think that they're going to do that? I think not. I have some ideas. I can't talk about them right now. We'll talk about them in comments. But I've got some ideas on how to make this work. Look for my comments and then feel free to reply. All right, this one is kind of top secret, so we're going to hold off on that. But due date on those comments is on the 18th of November. Monday is the comment deadline on that, and reply comments on that are due on December 2nd. Again, that is MB docket 17264. So fcc.gov/ECFS and docket 17264. And let's see here. We have 3 K-Love stations in New York City. And apparently, I guess there are 3 K-Loves in Austin, Texas. Now, of course, what we'd have to do is we'd have to look at the locations of each of those and see what their coverage areas are right now. Because I bet you what they're doing is they're interleaving them, but they're leaving them at less than 50%. And you know, to me, it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense, especially since these stations could be at least heard out to the 60. They need to, you know, for FM, they need to take it out to the 60. You know, they want, you know, there's forces that want to completely get rid of that rule, but there's also force, you know, but I see it the other way around. We need to extend it out, make it the 60. Same for commercial, non-commercial. AM, I would say keep it where it's at, because during the daytime, I mean, there's AM stations where Riverton is claimed in their 2 millivolt. I have a hard time hearing them. And I mean, what do we sound like right now on AM? Let's see if we can get the AM. Let's see if we can get the Yaesu going here. Okay, that's 1500 WFED out of DC. So as you can tell, I'm getting some noise on there. Good old AM analog. This is a local station in Salisbury, 1470.
An appearance at the National Press Club last night.
Yeah, okay. And I think our strongest station is 960. And this is our strongest station, 960. Yeah, we're getting noise on that too.
We're also handing out candy as well, but candy and packaged candy.
You know, and we're using a gap vertical, gap Titan vertical as the receive antenna on that, because that's our all-band amateur radio antenna. We're almost done here, by the way. I know we're taking forever here, but I'm in the mood for talking. And you know, feel free to, if you've got any questions, if anybody's still sticking around for this, if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to pop them into the chat right now, so that way we can talk about them. The FCC is scheduling a symposium on the current and future trends in the radio and television industries. And this goal of this symposium is to hear from industry experts and participants! It goes to show you why I don't do enough radio. About the current and future trends, challenges, and opportunities facing the broadcast, radio, and television industries. We'll carry this on Facebook Live on November 21st. This is the Thursday that the commission meeting is supposed to take place, so they're doing this instead, moving the commission meeting back to Tuesday, I guess. If you're interested in radio, listen in the morning Eastern time from 10 o'clock on till noon. And then if you're interested in television, stick around for the afternoon session, and you'll be able to do that. And so that's where it'll be at. That'll be carried on the FCC, and that'll also be carried on REC's Facebook Live. And then between the morning and afternoon sessions, that's when we'll do our REC Live. We'll have some time to do REC Live between the two sessions. While everybody else is having lunch, we'll be chatting. Okay, so that's pretty much what we've got there. So last call, any questions, any comments, anything that you want to discuss in the chat, speak now or forever hold yourself until next week. And going once, going twice, going 3 times. Yeah. Again, sorry folks that I missed the GRC this year, and we just had a lot of things come up at last minute. But you know, I did buy a ticket. I did buy a ticket for the GRC this past year. I was going to show up, but things happened. Anywho, not seeing anything. We're going to jump on out of here for now. Say sayonara, minasan, and we'll see you all. We'll do this again next week, 11 a.m. Same bat time, same bat YouTube. And please, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. The more subscribers we get, the better things we get from YouTube. And, you know, we want to improve this channel. And as soon as things finally break down, I do have some video content that I need to put together. I'm lazy where it comes. I'm really bad where it comes to this. But we need to make this happen soon. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.